Okay, we just started recording. So good evening, everybody. Thanks very much for coming along. This evening's session is an introduction to magic seaweed, and it's come about because I'm getting quite a lot of questions from different swimmers asking, what does this mean on magic seaweed? What does that mean, etc. And that's absolutely fine. That's why Norm and I have created this kind of group in this environment, because it allows people to openly ask questions about this stuff. And there is no such thing as a stupid question. That's why we're all in this together, so we can share from each other and learn from each other. The thing I would say is Magic Seaweed is if you've not come across it before, it's an online platform. There's a mobile version as an app, and there's a web-based version, and it is created specifically for people who are going surfing. It has not been created for people who are going swimming. And that's an important concept to understand, because whilst it has information that will be, I think, very relevant or very interesting to swimmers, it's not designed for swimmers. So when we look at the star ratings and things, and you see lots of stars, that doesn't mean it's going to be a good place to go swimming. This should be a fairly short intro session. And what I want to do really is just give a broad brush overview. So when you look at it and you look at the information, you've got a better idea about what you're seeing. Okay, so why this tutorial? Because I'm being asked quite a lot of questions about it. I firmly believe that whenever you're going out on the water to do whatever you're doing, whether it's swimming, kayaking, sailing, whatever, the more information we can understand, the better we can be informed and the better decisions we can make. It's all about being in the right place at the right time, in the right environment for the right experience that we're looking for. And as it says at the bottom, it's specifically designed for surfers, but there's information in there that is relevant for all of us. What I've done is I've taken, this is the actual forecast for local beach to me, Godrevy, which is just up the road. So this is the actual forecast for yesterday morning. And what I've done is I've taken the forecast from yesterday. I've also taken some video clips so that we can look at what Magic Seaweed says, and then we can interpret that to what it actually looks like. So the first thing to look at is when you open up Magic Seaweed, you'll have an option of areas. It's split into regions. You want to click on the UK, and then if you're in England, click on England. If you're in Ireland, Scotland, Wales, etc. And then there'll be regions within that. So for me in Cornwall, for instance, it's West Cornwall. I click on there, and then all the beaches that are available on Magic Seaweed are on there, and you can click on that. And if that beach has a webcam, then that's available to click on and watch as well. So yesterday morning, this was the forecast for Godrevy. And the very first thing that you should always look at when you're looking at Magic Seaweed is the star rating. This is kind of a nice visual indication of what the conditions in terms of the surf, the waves, are likely to be. And it gives you an indication of the power and the size of the waves. So it might be that you want to go to a beach, which is a surf beach, but actually you want it to be flat, in which case you would want all of these stars to be empty. So not filled in and certainly not dark, in which case you would expect the sea to be flat. The stars, the number of stars, is indicative of the size of the waves. And then how many of those stars are filled in is indicative of the quality of the waves. And when we're talking about quality from a surfing perspective, we're talking about generally they might have no wind or a slight offshore wind, which holds the waves up. And you'll see some video of this in a moment. But surfers are looking for waves where there's or wind, which is an offshore wind, which is wind blowing from the land out to sea, which will hold those waves up. The longer the wave is up, the longer the person can surf along it, and also the more powerful that wave tends to be, so they can go faster along it. So that's the first thing to look at, is this part here, is the star rating. The next thing to look at, which is important, is the swell size. And if any of you were following the discussion on the closed Facebook group, you'll see that there was a brief discussion where I was trying, I'm not sure particularly successfully, I was trying to explain that swell is not the same as waves. So swell is the bumps in the ocean which are far out to sea, and they're in deep water. So that is what's generated by a weather system, a low pressure system, lots of wind, and that's the swell, the bumps that make you feel sick when you're on the Ferry de France or Dover or whatever. And this is sorry. That is the swell size there. What we're looking at now is the period. Sorry. The period is when we get those bumps going in the ocean, it's the length of time it takes for one of those bits of swell to go and how long until the next bit of swell comes along. And that period is arguably one of the most important aspects to determine what the nature of a wave is going to be like. So the first thing when you look at it, get into your local beach of where you want to go to, have a look at the star rating, and you can see this for yesterday was 3 stars filled in during the night and early morning, and then it became 2 stars with only 1 filled in, and then 2 stars both filled in, and then sort of 1 star with only 2 stars with only 1 filled in. The next thing we're looking at is the period, 12 seconds. And that period is important because, as you can see, as in the example I've given here, if you've got a 4-foot wave, and on this yesterday we had 2 to 4 foot. If you have a 4-foot wave at a 10-second period, it means that it will be about chest high on somebody surfing along. And that can be really confusing if you're not into surfing. Actually, it's confusing for surfers as well. Surfers tend to measure waves in different ways, and you can look at, if you put 10 different surfers on a beach and showed them the same wave, they would probably all give you 10 different answers to how big that wave is. But on Magic Seaweed, they're like basic base of the wave, the surfable part of the wave. So when you think about a 2-foot wave, if that's 1 foot, you're not really talking about something which would only be up to your waist. You're actually talking about something that would be chest high when they're stood on the surfboard. When you have a 10-second period, so one wave goes across, and then 10 seconds, the next wave goes across, and 10 seconds, the next wave goes across. That means that the wave height, which is here, would be the same as the swell height or thereabouts. So you would expect at a 10-second period, the waves would be between 2 and 4 foot. Now you can see here for yesterday, the period was longer than that. It was 12 seconds. So actually we'd expect the waves to be probably chest high or maybe even head high or slightly above head when somebody's standing on a surfboard. So certainly very big to be surfing in, even though you may think, oh, 2 foot's not very much. The other example I've given, so I've said 4 foot at 10 seconds will give you a chest high wave, but a 4 foot wave at 16 seconds, so a longer period. So the waves, it's a longer period between the waves, might actually make a really big, powerful wave. Okay, so this is the video I took from the forecast that we looked at yesterday, and this is what it looked like. Now, this is taken from my drone, so it's a little bit difficult to get perspective, but you can see surfers are in the water here. So we've got nice even waves coming in, and if you can see those surfers, they're fairly small. So the waves are actually still, a reasonable size. And I have to say, I got in the water at 7:30 in the morning, and I took this footage just before I got in, and the waves were more powerful than I was expecting. Those of you that have already done the session on rips will probably notice, you can see this discolored water here. It's indicative of a permanent rip which is coming along, and you can actually see the water moving out this way here as well. Okay, the other thing to keep in mind is, oh, I've got another person just joining the Zoom. Hang on a second. Okay, the other thing to keep in mind is the swell direction. So we've looked at the star rating, which is the first thing to look at. We've looked at the period. Now what we want to do is we want to look at the direction the waves are traveling, because waves don't wrap around and go towards the UK, wherever you are. Waves are generated in either in the Atlantic or in the North Sea, for those of you up in the Northeast, and they can travel in different directions. So if you look at, this is Google Maps, and again, this is the beach where you've just seen the drone footage from. And if the swell is in a westerly, well, in this case, it's a northwesterly direction, it's going straight towards the beach, you can expect it to have waves there. And actually, at the beach that we're looking at, it will take wave directions from all sorts of different angles and directions. The diagram on the right-hand side is actually the village I live in, Portreath, and you can see that if you were to go swimming here, actually you would have the swell direction is quite affected by the geography of this area. So actually, if you have a swell direction coming from here, or southwesterly, which is coming from this way here, you may not get any waves there. So that can be quite useful if you're looking for a sheltered spot. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to stop my sharing for a minute. I'm just going to have a look and see if there's any questions. Either there's no questions in Zoom, so that's all good. Let me just have a look on the Facebook. Nope, doesn't look like it. So folks, if you do have any questions as we're going on, please feel free to drop them into, oh, there's 10 comments on Facebook, but I can only see the top 4. So I'm sorry, this is, as I say, very much a learning curve for me. I'm not sure why I can't see the rest of them. Right, I'll come back to that in a little bit then. Okay, so next thing is swell height. So first thing when we log in is look at the star rating. That gives us just an overall broad brush idea of what it might be at that beach. We've looked at the period, which is here. We know it's 12 seconds. The swell direction is are these arrows here, and you can see that the arrow is pointing that the swell is coming from the west. We know because of the diagram that a westerly swell is going to get into that beach, and that's why when we looked at the video, you could see that those waves coming in there. So those waves are coming in from westerly direction. So once we've got an idea of all of those things, a general overview, the period, the swell direction, now we're interested in the swell height. And this is where, so there's quite a lot of detailed information in here, but the more you go to the same beach and the more you look at this along with other forecasts, and I know Norma's really likes using windy, for example, and I think you get to like what you use the most, but try to use a whole range of things. Swell height is not the same as wave height. But you can see that this is saying the swell height is 2.5 foot at 12 seconds. And because it's more than 10 seconds, you can see that that's going to give us waves of about 2 to 4 foot. So the swell height is the height of the waves out in deep water. The wave height, which is this bit in here, is what the prediction, the mathematical prediction, is saying that the waves will be like on the beach, if that makes sense to you. And here's another clip that I took after I got out of the water. So this was, got in at 7:30, and I was about 9:45, something like that. And you can see that this is what the waves looked like a little bit later on that day, later on that morning. And if you can see, there are surfers out here. And if you see the size of the surfer and the size of the wave behind, you can see that actually the waves were quite big. Certainly not an environment to go out swimming in unless you were very, very confident and you were specifically going out to surfing to swim in surf. And this is not an environment for 99.9% of people swimming. It does give you an idea of what that forecast actually looks like. I'm going to skip back to the forecast again, so you can see that this is saying it's around about 2 to 4 foot. It's 2 stars filled in. That is, the swell height is 2.5 foot. The period is 12 seconds, and the direction is westerly. And what that looks like is that. I'm going to go back to this again because there's a whole lot of other information here which I've completely ignored. And that is, appears to be a secondary swell. And when you get waves that arrive on a beach, the magic seaweed prioritizes, because not all waves come from the same swell or from the same weather system or low pressure depression in for example, the Atlantic. If you have a low pressure system that sits down off the Bay of Biscay, for instance, you could well have another low pressure system which is sitting much further north, maybe off of Scotland. And so now you've got waves coming from two low pressure systems and they're arriving at the beach. So actually, at that time of the morning, we had 2.5 foot of swell at 12 seconds going in a westerly direction. But we had another swell, which is 1.5 foot at 10 seconds, coming from a southwesterly direction. And it doesn't always have it, but yesterday we had a third swell as well, which is 2.5 foot at 7 seconds in a southerly direction. And I can tell you from personal experience that every now and again, a much bigger set of waves came through. So you'd be surfing for 20 minutes, very comfortable, and then a much bigger set of waves would come in. And that's probably because one or two of these combined to create much larger waves. The other information it gives you is the wind strength, which is here. And in red, it gives you the gusts and then the wind direction. And this changes color as well. When it's green, it means that the wind is blowing away from the beach offshore. And it says it's sunny and it's 13 degrees. This information here, I wouldn't pay a huge amount of attention to. My experience, I much prefer looking at the Met Office website. Magic Seaweed really has got all the detail and information about waves, waves prediction, and surfing. If I want to know what the weather's doing, I'll look at a specific weather forecast instead. Okay, so in summary, Magic Seaweed popular forecast. It's used by surfers to predict waves at the local break. But I do think that swimmers can benefit from the information. It can help them to predict what the current and future conditions might be like. Also, it can help them to identify when you look at wave, if it's rough and you look at a swell direction, might be able to identify a sheltered spot if you just want to go for a little paddle somewhere that's not got any waves in it. Any of these forecasts are a mathematical prediction of a dynamic environment. They're never going to be 100%. But the more information you gather and the more regularly you look at it, every time you go to the beach, the better an understanding that you'll get of what that actually means at your beach. A lot of this information that I've got in here came directly from Magic Seaweed. I use it every day that I go surfing or I'm on the water, but actually there is more information. So you can, if you want to find out more about that, fire away with questions, but you can actually go on and read more information about it on the Magic Seaweed website. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to see if I can have a look at the chat. There's 14 questions on there now. They're coming up to the top. That's good. So Saskia, so the surf column is the size of the waves breaking on the beach, and the swell height is the height. I'd say you have got it perfect. That's really, really good because it's not the easiest thing to explain. You're absolutely right. The surf bit is how big the waves are on the beach. And then I think that's Johnny. The direction, is that a general direction, e.g. westerly? Yes, it is a general direction. And as I say, you can have swell coming from different directions, but it will have the primary swell, which is the one that will have the biggest influence on the environment. And then another question, the swell height and duration, how are these predicted? So they're predicted by some pretty complicated meteorology equipment. There are wave buoys that are out in the sea that help to predict this. For instance, there's wave buoy off Land's End, so they use the data that's come from that, and wave buoys that are all out in the ocean. They're measuring this all of the time, combining that with meteorological information about pressure at the surface, so pressure, surface tension, wind speeds, all of that information to make a model which helps to predict what the waves and conditions would be like. And then Saskia again, so ideally you want a short gap between the swells. I would say actually no. The longer the gap, the more organized the sea is, and from a swimming perspective, the better that is. If we go, if you remember that last video I showed you, the waves are far apart. If they were really close together, it would be, and you wanted to swim in waves, it would be really difficult to swim because you wouldn't be able to relax into any sort of swimming stroke in that environment. But the swell height wants to be low, and the period wants to be long. The longer the period, effectively, the faster the wave is traveling. So even if you have a small wave at a long period, it may generate quite a powerful wave. Okay, I'm going to finish up with that, guys. I apologize if I've missed any questions, but I will go back and have a look now, and I'll message, kind of use my fingers on Facebook. It is a bit of a learning curve for me. I hope that's answered most of your questions and given you a brief understanding of how to use Magic Seaweed. Those of you that are doing the session on waves and weather this evening, I'll see you all in just over half an hour. But otherwise, have a lovely evening. Thank you very much.